Hi there, my name is Marin Smith, and I am going to be talking about the integrated threat theory. As far as looking through all the articles that you had for us, I read through them all. I understood the majority of them, and this one was the one that really stood out to me and really captured my attention as far as thinking that I wanted to go more in depth on it and wanted to present basically a whole PowerPoint on. So here we go. So what it means, and this is basically what it means theoretically what I found, and then what it meant to me. So I have that the integrated threat theory, it's a tongue twister, which is also known as an intergroup threat theory, is a theory in psychology and sociology which attempts to describe the components of perceived threats that led to prejudice between social groups. This theory deals with perceived threat rather than actual threat. So this goes in terms with, I'll give you an example. As far as a black man going to a store, there's always that threat that he'll be stereotyped as stealing, or there's always that threat that he will be judged and misrepresented just because of his race. Or that goes along with a um a woman wears a baseball hat backwards, she might be judged and stereotyped as maybe a lesbian just because of the fashion that she's wearing. So these are the threats that underline and come from basically stereotypes, and that they're not always there, but they're perceived to be there. These threats can be realistic though, but are oftentimes not when being threatened or talked about. So as I mentioned, they're not realistically present in that moment, but the threats can be realistic and can happen in everyday real life. And then I have the anxiety that comes with the threats can be measured to determine how effective the integrated threat is. So these come with, social groups. When somebody is entered into a social group, you can test how high their anxiety goes. And this could be with surveys, this could be with blood pressure cuffs, things like that. So all these threats can be measured to determine how effective the integrated threat really is. So the article that I found, the outside scholarly article, was from 2016, and it was How to Improve Adolescent Stress Responses. And then it was Insights from Integrating Implicit Theories of Personality and Biopsychosocial Models. So what my article was mainly about was the negative social evaluations are all around during adolescence. Such stressors can contribute to dysregulations in neuroendocrine and autonomic reactivity that can accumulate into mental and physical health problems, impaired cognitive performance, and even academic underachievement, which poses a threat to that adolescent in the long run. So, what I read about was mainly, it was just talking about how teenagers and adolescents, they perceive the world as such a stressful time. They perceive school, they perceive all these challenges at home, challenges from society as a stressor, and this is all leading to things like that impaired cognitive performance. There's leading to health problems and things. These are threats that are present and can become real life, how do I put it? Real life disabilities even. The thought of stressors and not conforming to society poses this great amount of distress to these teenagers. And it is all so unnecessary. These underlying threats can be avoided and they can be helped by not putting such pressure on these teenagers. And so at the bottom, I have my link for that article. And then let's go dive down deep into it. So the studies that were performed in the article that I read about was that it stated that they test whether implicit theories of personality are global belief systems that create situation-specific actions that give that rise to challenge or threat responses to acute stressors and therefore provide a key to improving adolescent stress responses. So by testing what these adolescents are being stressed out about, they will be able to narrow it down and help provide responses to deal with this stress. putting these adolescents through these situations is difficult, especially knowing that it is going to trigger the stress in the first place, but it is so necessary in order to, like I said, finding that resolution, finding that way to help in future stress related situations. So they predicted that teaching adolescents an incremental theory of personality would promote more challenge type responses to social stress. This which would result in improved cognitive functioning during stress. If you're able to teach these adolescents how to deal when they are in this stress-like situation, then it becomes less stressful. They're not just thrown into a social gathering per se and not know how to talk. If we provide them with the necessary means to help themselves get through these situations and help themselves calm down, we will be able to then create these less stressful environments. So study one, this was a screenshot from my article. It was these participants. We determined that a sample of 60 participants would be needed to achieve an average effect. So you have to have the right amount of people to get a legitimate experiment. A total of 60 high school students were recruited from the Rochester, New York area using posted flyers and study information distributed by peers and teachers. And then this was the demographic for the participants: 55% female, 45% male, which was pretty equal, 70% white, 15% black, 12% Asian or Asian American, and 3% other. It was a pretty diverse study. They recruited from 9th, 10th, and 11th grade classrooms, so the mean age was about 15 years and the range was 14 to 17. And they were actually paid for their study $50. Participants were pre-screened and excluded for physician-diagnosed hypertension, cardiac abnormalities, and the presence of cardiac pacemakers. So this was able to allow them to really test that stress level on a non-stressed person normally. So people that were taking medications and being pregnant or nursing, they were not chosen to participate. So it was a pretty fair and thought out study. Time since waking and start date of the previous menstrual cycle were recorded and included as correlations in a hormone analysis for the women. All data exclusions due to malfunctioning equipment, lost data, or non-compliance are listed in the supplemental material available online. So this really shows that the studies and the setups were really, really thought out and they were provided well. So this was the procedure. When the participants arrived at the laboratory, non-invasive electrocardiography were performed on them. So their blood pressures were taken, their sensors were placed, and then participants rested for 5 minutes, baseline recording, and then provided a baseline saliva sample. So with each randomly assigned to complete an incremental theory or an active control reading and writing exercise, after the intervention, participants were told that they would be asked to complete a social stress task and given 3 minutes to prepare. So this was really to test. They told them what they had to do, and then they gave them a time limit. And this, for anybody, is a stressful situation. So this is a graph that shows the control condition and then the incremental theory condition. So it just shows the anticipation plus the post-task. So the anticipation, you can see here, is a lot lower. And then here, it's a lot higher than it was the post-task. And so this is the cortisol, and then this is the threat appraisal. And so the control condition, incremental theory condition. So this just goes to show you how they were able to measure what they were studying. Study 2 was conducted with 9th grade Algebra 1 students. So this again was 55% female, 44% male, 56% white, 39% Hispanic, 3.1 African American. So again, it was a diverse test, pretty equal female, male. And in this first semester of high school, when threats of social status and academic rank are known to be substantial, persuasive, and unpredictable, this sample size was determined by the maximum number of participants who were willing to provide consent. And this would be hard, especially when dealing with social status and rank, because that is such a high thrived thing when it comes to high school. So a total of 303 participants consented and to complete the intervention and self-report questions and have their school record analyzed. So this 303 is a pretty large number when it comes to a sample. So the procedure for this one was each participant was randomly assigned at the individual level to complete the incremental theory intervention or control materials in his or her Algebra 1 class. Materials were contained in individualized envelopes, a procedure analogous to the used in affirmation studies. After completing the materials, students placed them back in the envelopes and handed them to the experimenters. Materials took 20 to 30 minutes to complete. Teachers and research assistants were unaware of hypothesis or intervention consent, and the messages were never discussed with students after this experience. Saliva samples were collected at baseline and each of days 5 through 9 after intervention. All saliva samples were collected at the same time of day to control for diurnal rhythm within individuals. So these samples were frozen and shipped off site to be assessed for adrenal hormones, cortisol, and the dihydroepiandrosterone sulfate. So these really test how much adrenaline was in their system when they were completing this, and how stressed out they really were when they were completing these self-evaluations. So again, both of those studies really showed, they put time limits, they put pressures, they asked really difficult questions when it came to social status, things like that in the classroom, and it just led to these individuals, these high school students, being challenged to look beyond what they were and who they were, as far as, in a stressful situation that they didn't want. And so in conclusion, I chose this theory based on the importance that it has in society, especially more now than ever with these underlying threats that people aren't willing to talk about. Integrated threats contributing to race and gender are present and need to be talked about, and they really just need to have more light shed upon them in these times, especially as me being a white woman. I have not experienced much threats regarding my race or gender or even sexual orientation, being that I am heterosexual. So I think it's something that even I am not educated on, and I would love to educate others on. This article was relevant on the stressors teenagers face and what leads to many of them being afraid to express their true identities and to embrace who they are freely due to the threats that pose among the LGBTQ community. And I know that seems random, I just threw that in there at the end, but I really do believe that it all starts at that young adolescent age. So with what we've been talking about in class, with the coming out, gender normality, things like that, I do believe that this article does shed some light, and it could even tie into why individuals are so not necessarily scared, but why they're so reserved when it comes to expressing who they are. And I think it's because of all the stressors that go along with it, and all the threats, the integrated threat theories, all that goes along with being who you are. So if I can shed some light on individuals and help them learn and help them know that it's okay to be them, I would always love to do that, and that's why I chose this theory. Thank you.